Okay, I think we're chapter 4 for the district supervisor's roles and responsibilities. Next slide. Okay, so you've been appointed a board member or reappointed potentially, and we thank you for your service. And now you're here and thinking, well, what is it that I'm tasked to do? So there's a learning curve, and hopefully this orientation is giving everybody a little bit of a flavor, and we can certainly answer questions. But really, just a couple key points here before we get into the powers of the board. First and foremost, you are an appointed local official, so there are legal responsibilities associated with your position. Largely kind of on an operational, you're charged with conducting the affairs of the district as set forth in state law. Your goal as a board supervisor is to stay engaged, to help establish and implement programs through the conservation partnership that Jen just described to protect and conserve soil, water, prime and unique farmland, rangeland, woodland, wildlife, energy, and other renewable resources on local, non-federal, essentially private land. So any and all natural resource concerns are within the domain of the district to consider and to provide that financial and technical assistance we've alluded to. And in form of engagement, you are required to attend the monthly board meetings. You have to attend at least, there's 12 each year. You have to attend at least 50% of those, as we've said, as well as any other committee or special meetings or events that may be scheduled for the board, either through MASCD, state committee, or other such expectation for board members to stay engaged outside of just the monthly board meetings is there as well. And for you to identify local conservation needs that represent the diversity of agriculture in your community, and to use that structure and the communications either with the district conservationist and district manager, or to elevate it through state committee and MASCD to really speak to the local needs within your community as you know them to be for your particular agricultural landowners and operators. Next slide. So then in terms of the powers themselves, again, these are enumerated in state law. They're very specific. They are very extensive. So we'll take time and go through each of them. And then we've also provided an example just to be able to give a little context beyond what is just written into the Maryland Ag article. So first, the power of the supervisor is one, to conduct surveys, investigations, or research and disseminate that information. So an example of this could be soil surveys, watershed studies, research that would be conducted, again, within the boundaries of the district itself. Number two, the ability to conduct demonstration projects, whether this be, hosting field tours, doing installation of new and innovative conservation practices, showcase watersheds where folks were able to look at how some conservation is being locally applied. All of that is a power of the Board of Supervisors. Number three, carry out preventative and control measures in the district on state-owned land. As an example, so there are, in many cases in Prince George's County, there is some USDA territory. In Dorchester, there is the Blackwater Wildlife Refuge. So any of those grounds that are held by the state or public lands, maybe even held federal, there is the ability of the district to work collectively with those public entities and organizations to be able to address soil erosion, water quality, any kind of conservation needs on those non-private lands. Number four, enter agreements to furnish assistance to any government entity or private individuals. This says that the districts can enter into contracts. This can be cooperator agreements with some of the conservation partners, such as NRCS and USDA. It can also be contractual agreements with third-party private consulting or engineering services. You have the ability to enter into those legal agreements. Number five, you can acquire, lease, purchase, exchange, gift, grant, sell, or dispose of real or personal property. So in some cases, the districts are landholders. They own the land and the buildings where the district offices themselves are. And so you can enter into real estate transactions for those grounds that you acquire and or sell on behalf of conducting business of the district. Next, maintain, administer, improve, receive, and expend income from acquired properties. Again, some of the districts own those office buildings, so maybe they are generating rental revenue from other lessees in the building. That revenue is then maintained by the district itself and is able to be expended on other needs that are specific to the district, as well as conducting their business. And then last, make available to district land occupiers machinery, fertilizer, seedlings, any etc. materials to conserve soil resources and prevent erosion according to the terms prescribed by the supervisors. So this speaks to what we call the conservation equipment rental program. Several districts have, as an example, no-till planters or some other pieces of equipment, maybe new innovative conservation equipment that may not be readily available yet in their area. We have a picture of a manure injector here. The district can own that equipment and set its own rental rates and its own rental policies, and then provide that equipment at a cost to the landowners, occupiers, and operators within the district itself. Next slide. So then we continue with the powers here. First is to take over or administer any soil conservation, erosion control, or erosion prevention project. So in some cases, there are delegated authorities from other organizations, the Maryland Department of Environment. In some cases, the districts are just a known technical assistance provider and someone who kind of formally takes a role with design and construction oversight. But again, that ability to be readily involved and the flexibility of the district to have a formal role in any soil erosion preventative measures is the primary purpose and function of the districts, and is spoken to in the powers of the districts to be involved within that context. Next, you may act as an agent of the United States or the state in connection with acquisition, construction, operation of soil conservation and erosion control or prevention projects. So again, the legal ability of the district to enter into contracts, to be a grantee or a named recipient, or to go into contracts for specific projects that are for the stated outcome of conservation and erosion control, that legally you're able to be a designee and assignee into those contracts and into those projects themselves. Third on the list, you can accept gifts of money, service, materials from the United States and state to carry out the objectives. So again, building on the second here, to be a grantee, the districts often can go after additional funding sources to implement, whether they be stream restoration projects or larger capital improvement projects that are maybe outside their other funding sources they may receive, that the district can pursue grant monies, can administer and oversee those grant funds, and receive that revenue from outside entities beyond their traditional funding sources. A very important one here is to approve, disapprove sediment and erosion control plans. Again, the districts are a delegated authority. In this case, this comes through the Maryland Department of Environment and is outlined in the Environment article of state law, but it gives the power and oversight a little bit differently in different districts, but really is the named individual to be able to review and oversee any erosion and sediment control activity within the boundaries of the district. And that can be both on agricultural operations and urban operations that many districts are heavily involved with. To offset the cost of the erosion and sediment control and that function that the districts are providing, the districts are allowed to recommend a fee system for conducting those, providing those technical assistances and those resources, recognizing that it takes quite a bit of workload and capacity. The district can take fees for those services. Those fees often have to be approved and reviewed within the county structure itself and cannot be so exorbitant as to either undercut a third party or to generate too much revenue for the district itself. So it really does have to be true to the cost of the services, but those can be reviewed on a regular basis with your own county governments to set that fee system. Make and execute contracts, sue and be sued. Again, you're a legal political subdivision of the state, so you're carrying and executing legal authority. And as such, there are risks associated with some of that work. And so there is an opportunity where the districts could be party to a legal dispute or lawsuit. We can speak more as to kind of representation that the districts get through the Office of the Attorney General in the state. So you're not left to carry those legal disputes on your own, but you are, understandably someone that could be named in a legal dispute and have to be called to questions and or documentation. Next, we have providing contracting services, equipment, and supplies to landowners. Again, this speaks pretty similarly to the conservation equipment rental and being able to provide additional services. Again, any of those things that were in the context of carrying out the mission of the districts that may be outside equipment and supplies that could be provided to a landowner or an operator. You are also tasked to construct, improve, and maintain structures for the performance of subtitle objectives. So that is referring to when there are conservation programs, whether they be EQIP or the state MAX program, the district is the source of that technical assistance. And so you are often the one designing and providing construction oversight to make sure that the conservation practice is installed appropriately and according to NRCS standards, and providing that job approval, oversight, and authority to be able to say that the conservation practice hasn't been installed according to any of those requirements, and providing that verification. And then lastly, develop and publish comprehensive plans for conserving soil resources and preventing erosion in districts. So this can take many forms in terms of either local, annual plans, long-term strategic plans that the individual district chooses to review and enact. And it can also speak more broadly to the role of the district in state and federal programs. So the example here is the watershed implementation plan. Certainly the districts are very involved and regularly engaged on the watershed implementation plan and how the agricultural community is helping to address those Chesapeake Bay goals. And it's the roles of the supervisors to really think comprehensively and thoughtfully about the role of their district in helping to obtain those goals and putting those forward into different planning documents. Next slide. Okay, so just to quickly summarize, again, this is a lot of powers. Those are all outlined, as we said, in the ag article in state law. So there are citations for each of those. They are wide and comprehensive. There are quite a number of them that the districts, some use more readily than others, but all of them are within the legal authority. We'll draw attention to just a couple that we will provide more detail about, again, that you're a legal entity, the ability of the districts to both sue and be sued, and what that means in terms of legal risk. Certainly within the districts, because you are a political subdivision of the state, you are also subject to open meeting laws. That's a set of laws meant to provide kind of transparency in government and to think about how the public engages with the district, their ability to attend meetings, to understand the work and the actions and decisions being made by the districts. And with all of those, again, that there is some legal responsibilities, but the districts are not having to go that alone. So we, through the Office of the Attorney General, that's housed here with the MDA, provide representation and support and guidance through the Office of the Attorney General and through legal counsel to be able to provide support to the district when questions on these matters are arising. And then last, we'll say, really, despite the job description, the long list of powers, the way we would say that's important for the supervisors to not just be informed by attending meetings and trainings like these, but to be really engaged. That's really what's most critical to executing the mission of the district, is your participation, your active engagement, really thinking again at that local level and on a regular basis, thinking about plans and ways to prioritize workloads and programs specific to your region, as those priorities can be a little different across different districts. Certainly there's diverse agricultural operations. And we ask that the board supervisors are routinely assessing kind of your progress and priorities, that this isn't any one plan is a one and done and we put it on the shelf, but that we're proactively thinking about, how are we evolving and meeting the needs of all of the agricultural operations within our district. We as supervisors are adhering to, the highest bar of ethical practices as to how you're conducting business, the transparency in government and access, and making sure that the optics of everything is as it should be as well, so that there's no questions about conflicts. And then lastly, for you as a supervisor to be an example of conservation on your own farm operation, if you're fortunate enough to have one, or to be an advocate for conservation. So if you're someone who doesn't actively work as a producer, but just associated with agriculture, that you're an advocate for conservation, its benefits, and the role of the districts within Maryland.